Thank you, Sharif. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation to join this important discussion. First off, like it was said, I'm Sergeant Kathy Estrada from the Montgomery County Department of Police Community Engagement Division, and Officer Almagarber is also in that division. So our mission is to provide the resources and services to our community in effort to strengthen relationships. And we do this through open, transparent communication and proactive engagement. So right now through C19, it's kind of hurting us a little bit because we're used to being out there and being very active, but now you've given us another forum in which we can be active with the community through Zoom as well as social media. So one of the responsibilities of the Community Engagement Division, or CED for short, is to initiate, assist, and follow up with any investigations concerning hate crime or a bias incident. So first off, one thing is we have a lot of confusion on what is a hate crime and what is a bias incident. So hate crime, simply put, is a criminal act that is motivated in whole or in part by the offender's biases. And this could be a bias against the victim's race, religion, disability, whether it's physical or mental, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender orientation, and in the state of Maryland, it's homelessness. So this is considered the protected classes. So our division goes out and we do a lot of engaging with the community, and we do this in the 3 E's. First is education. We go out to the schools, attend meetings. Sharif can go ahead and talk about more about our education part and also our engagement part. But one important thing we do to educate the public, and you can find this on our county website under police, is that we publish a yearly report on hate crimes and bias incidents in which anybody can go ahead and download and get the information. However, due to personnel issues and of course the crisis that we're facing right now, the 2019 report has been delayed. We pass out flyers, and we work in conjunction, as Reverend Casey Caseman mentioned, with the Office of Human Rights and also the Committee Against Hate Violence. In the part of the engagement, we participate in the Friendship Picnic, many school events, the Human Rights Day in Annapolis. Our division also, participates in the Office of the Attorney General Work Group against hate crimes. And in fact, if somebody asked, we've been monitoring and following several House bills that were presented this year in Annapolis. And in fact, another person from our division went to Annapolis in order to testify for the passing of a certain bill. So we have 4 that we've been following. I don't know if anybody's going to touch on these, but I just wanted to go ahead and touch them because they're very important. First one is House Bill 0005. Hate crimes, use of an item or a symbol to threaten or intimidate a group, particularly anybody using a swastika, swastika and or a noose, that would make it an automatic hate crime. House Bill 485, hate crimes, the penalty, which will be enhanced. House Bill 541, which is the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission training requirement that all law enforcement in the state of Maryland would have to have some training concerning hate crimes and also bias incidents. State Bill 335, hate crimes, harassment, and destruction of property, which I don't know about any other counties, but I know in Montgomery County, our highest incident is vandalisms that occur. And then enforcement. So as soon as we get a report that a bias incident or a hate crime happens, officers respond. We document, and then we investigate. And we, of course, follow up. Each district has a victim advocate, which assists the victims in trying to get assistance, whether counseling or any financial assistance that they might have incurred as a result of the crime or the bias incident. At this time, I'll turn it over to Sharif to talk more about our engagement and our education.
Hello, everyone. This is Officer Sharif from Montgomery County Police. Can you hear me okay? Okay. All right. So my sergeant, he pretty much covered the big bulk of everything. I just want to emphasize maybe one small thing, which is when you report a hate crime in Montgomery County Police Department from Montgomery County resident, it is in the eye of the victim. in the meaning that if the victim feels that the crime was committed against him or her that involves a reason of hate in the several cases that my sergeant mentioned, it doesn't matter in which eye except of the victim's eye. So if that victim getting the feeling that because I'm Muslim, because I'm Middle Eastern, because I'm African American, this crime happened to me, and that's how he or she representing their complaint and requesting to file a report, we are obligated, we have to take the police report for that. But we take the police report to document it, but also it is important to know that that word crime need to exist. It's not just the hate act, but also the crime needs to be involved. A simple example, like what my sergeant mentioned, which is vandalism. So if you have an act of vandalism that involved, which is the crime part of the story, that involved a certain statement because of a race or because of a faith involved, that will be documented. But even if the crime did not exist and they would like to document a certain event in the report, that will be documented. We also require to present certain numbers to Maryland state government, because we need to keep track of any hate incidents, hate crime incidents that happen. So we screen everything before we submit them the final numbers, just to make sure that actually the numbers are accurate. So something to remember, which is, again, it's always important that if I tell you I hate you all people, that's not a crime, right? But if I say I hate you all people, whatever the race, and then I follow up by keying your car, for example, with the vandalism part, well, now that's a crime with the hate statement, so that will be applying to the hate crime. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so Tom, would you like to go next?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, okay. Hi, my name is Thomas Coyle. I'm the supervisory special agent with the FBI. My squad covers the Montgomery County, Prince George's, the kind of southern part of Maryland. We investigate civil rights crimes all throughout the state of Maryland. And as was mentioned by the sergeant from Montgomery County, hate crimes, she defined it just as precisely as what the federal hate crime, excluding the homelessness aspect. For the most part, our outreach with the FBI, we try to do outreach with local community groups, with the state law enforcement officers, and also any kind of local police departments. We work closely with local police departments whenever investigating hate crimes that come in. If they need our assistance, we are more than happy to help provide whatever technical assistance, be it the digital media, or if there's any kind of hate crime incident that has to do with social media, we investigate those matters. So for the most part, we assist with the state and locals. Maryland has very good hate crime laws that we as the FBI will use and to help investigate things. For the most part, if there is a hate crime that does fall into our purview, we will work it with the locals. If the local police departments or local authorities can't investigate the matter, then we'll take it over. But if they can, then we'll just assist the investigation and help make sure it comes to a successful conclusion. As the civil rights section, we deal with about a third of our complaints come in as far as hate crimes. And that's a pretty big chunk of our investigations. And of those hate crimes, about 30% of it tends to be religious-based and 43% tends to be race-based. And we also, as the officer was mentioning, we do have to be concerned about First Amendment rights. So that is something that anytime we get organizations or these hate groups that come in and start making threatening speech, we have to determine if that's actually threatening speech or if it's a First Amendment right of theirs. So once we determine that, then we'll proceed with an investigation. Something that we don't need to worry about with as far as so if there's threatening speech, we don't need to worry about the actor's ability or their instability. So we have had investigations where people from another state in a wheelchair-bound man called a synagogue, made threatening remarks, racist remarks, and threatened to blow up the synagogue. We did investigate that and eventually arrest the person. So we don't, are not always concerned about the ability to carry out the act, the fact that the threat is happening. We have 4 statutes that we usually use to investigate hate crimes. We do, depending on what happens, we'll use these crimes to investigate it. So a great example is federally protected activities. So if someone's trying to attend school and then a party tries to stop them because of race, color, or religion, we will, and threatens to hurt them, then we will investigate that matter. We also have, if someone is injured, causes bodily injury because of race, religion, or national origin, we'll investigate those matters. And then finally, we also do the Housing Rights Act. That is when, because of someone's race, religion, or national origin or gender, that they are threatened within their houses per se. Example of that would have been back in the day when crosses were being burned in neighborhoods. We would investigate those matters. As I said, we do with the FBI, we help out the state and locals. We give a lot of forensics analysts. We also help out with doing any kind of behavioral analyst of the crimes, and hopefully come to a successful conclusion. That's it.
Thank you so much. Could you just talk a little bit, if someone feels that they are a victim of a hate crime or a target of a hate crime, what is the first or second thing that they should do? What are the first things that they should do?
Always call, the first thing you should do is call the local police department, especially if it's something serious that there's potential for injury. Then so what we sometimes do, if we have a good relationship with that local police department, they'll refer the matter to us or they'll ask for our assistance. We also scour media reportings to see if there's anything that we can investigate as well. But first and foremost, call the local police department, and then they can call us at the FBI. They'll refer the matter to my unit, and then we will also investigate it. But most likely, if it gets referred to us, I'll reach out to the local police department just to make sure that they are investigating the matter also and provide any kind of assistance. We will always help out and co-investigate it, so to speak. And then we will bring whatever resources to bear to help investigate the matters. But first and foremost, call local police departments.
Thank you very much. Okay. So now we're going to move on to Jay Gruber, who's the Chief of Police with Georgetown University.
Thank you, Simi. Hate and bias incidents do happen on college campuses as well. And we do some things a little bit differently on college campuses. We do investigate hate crimes and encourage our students to report hate crimes. but we will also record bias incidents. Most universities have a pretty robust process where they intake any bias incident as well, so it doesn't have to include a hate crime or a crime itself. And these bias incidents are investigated by somebody in the university's Office of Equity or Diversity Inclusion, not necessarily investigated by the police. When we do have a hate crime, we will investigate it. In many cases, we'll reach out to Metropolitan Police Department Special Liaison Branch. Lieutenant David Hong is on this seminar and can elaborate more on that wonderful unit. And we'll also reach out to the local JTTF. All universities have a liaison agent on their local Joint Terrorism Task Force, and we'll reach out directly with them with assistance in investigating that hate crime. Universities are very diverse, multicultural environments, so we do see quite a few of these incidents from a religious, racial, and ethnic perspective. Students don't react very well to when these things happen. So we investigate them very aggressively, and we always encourage students that anything that they feel is an ethnic or racially or religiously motivated bias incident or hate crime to report these things. And across the country on universities, these things are taken very seriously and they're investigated aggressively to make sure there's a safe environment for our students to live and learn. And that's really the extent of what we have. I mean, the Sergeant Estrada and the FBI agent really defined what we're looking for in these hate crimes, but to emphasize that on at least on university campuses, there's a lot of opportunity when you perceive the incident to be a bias incident, not involving a crime. Somebody has yelled a racial epithet at you. Somebody makes you feel uncomfortable because of what they're talking about. A professor says something that you perceive as being biased. We encourage you to report that through, we have a very strong bias reporting system at Georgetown University, and our Department of Diversity, Equity, and Affirmative Action will aggressively investigate that. That's what we're looking at on college campuses right now.
Jay, do you see any particular communities on campuses being targeted more than others?
We see generally our Jewish students, we see our African-American students, and we see a lot of our Latino students. And more recently, believe it or not, with the COVID-19 outbreak, some of our Chinese and Asian students were targeted. But those are the three major groups that we see: Jewish, African-American, Latinx, and more recently our Chinese students.
Thank you very much. Then I'd like to turn it over to Officer David Hong from the MPD.
Sorry, can you guys hear me? I was having a little bit of phone difficulty. Hey, so first off, I want to thank everyone for inviting me to this. It's a real honor to be a part of something like this. Just to give you guys a little background about my unit and what we do. First off, my name is Lieutenant David Hong. I run the Special Liaison Branch out of Washington, D.C., the Metropolitan Police Department. And what SLB is we have a variety of units within the unit. And so we have officers that face are grouped into interfaith, our African liaison unit, our Asian liaison unit, our Latino liaison unit, LGBT unit, and our deaf and hard of hearing unit. We have officers that speak a variety of languages, and also 2 officers that can sign language. We're out in the community daily, just reaching out to the leaders and working with anyone in the community. Our biggest thing is to ensure that the people in the community are comfortable talking to the police. For example, a lot of the Latino population in DC, which is very large, they just don't know how to report a lot of crimes. And so we try to make the awareness out there that there's a police aspect of it that we want to help and not to kind of be afraid of the police. We also do all the hate crimes. So to give you an example, if a patrol officer goes to a scene, he sees that the hate bias, they'll page us, and one of my officers will go out to the scene. An example would be, if a transgender female was attacked due to her sexual orientation, one of my LGBT officers would go out there. We would take over the investigation, and we would go from there, working with our U.S. Attorney's Office and our partners, which I'll get into in a minute. We're in constant contact with the churches. Do community outreach through our media, through our public information office. At this time, as you guys can imagine, the spike of crime we've been seeing, the hate bias crime or hate bias incidents and crime, like Chief Gruber is saying, MPD also documents all incidents and offenses, so we make sure we report on everything. And we've been seeing an increase in the Jewish community and also the Chinese community, or Asian as a whole, just the hate bias incidents. And so that's something that we're bracing for, and we're kind of working through now. It's kind of in the beginning stages, but we're well prepared. Luckily, all my officers in the unit are cross-trained. Another thing I failed to mention was within the 7 districts in Washington, D.C., we also have an affiliate program, which is my team. We train all the other officers that may be Asian or Latino or consign or LGBT. They're hubbed into the district as well to assist us on these type of cases. So we have a large reach within the police department. We work very, very closely with the mayor's office. The mayor's office in Washington, D.C. has a lot of subsets as well. They have like an Asian affairs, LGBT affairs, Latino affairs, African affairs, and we're working with them on a daily basis. We also work with like HSEMA, which is a Homeland Security Emergency Management System within DC, and they run something that's called IPAC. If you guys didn't know, it's the Interfaith Preparedness Advisory Group, and that's where we have meetings with all the local interfaith establishments, and we kind of go over safety protocols that we see fit. Also, I know that ADL is on the line, the Anti-Defamation League. I've been feeding a lot of information to them lately, and so we've been working well together. And so it's kind of a nonstop partnership with a lot of people. Like Chief Gruber said, I just talked to him last week. I've been talking to the other chiefs at the local colleges because I know that some of the colleges are facing more of a problem with the hate bias incidents. And, I'm here to just kind of support anybody within the Washington area and even outside. And so that's kind of what we do at SLB.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Officer. So I'm now going to open it up for questions. I know that we've been getting some questions already, so I'll just go ahead and start with those. And then if anyone else has other questions, please feel free to send them in the chat. So the first question is, does the FBI have a designated office that is responsible to monitor white supremacist groups? And if so, what is it called and how does one contact it?
So we, as far as the FBI is concerned, monitoring just a particular group, it all depends on that group and what they're doing. So we do have a domestic terrorism squad that are concerned about domestic terrorists within the region or within our AOR. But as far as monitoring someone, we have to be concerned about the First Amendment rights, as I spoke about earlier. So we will, if we get complaints in about a certain group, we will investigate that. But we can't just monitor groups without having some sort of predication there. Hope that answers that question.
All right, thank you. Then the question is, are people who are convicted of hate crimes prohibited from possessing or purchasing guns in Maryland? And is that included in the definition of a prohibited purchaser federally or in Maryland?
I believe, I can't speak for the state side, but on the federal side, yes, they would be considered prohibited. I don't know if one of the other officers would like to speak about the state side, but I would believe that would also qualify.
Sergeant Estrada?
I think, okay, yes, it would depend on the type of crime. And then obviously they would be considered a prohibited person.
Okay. Is a phone call, voicemail, or email threatening violence based on religion, race, or other protected class considered a hate crime?
So I think you would have to, it's kind of hard to give that blanket statement, but for the most part, if what we get is when a synagogue receives a call that they're going to threaten the members of that church, if they continue doing what they're doing, then we would consider that a hate crime.
All right, thank you. So here's another question. Someone was wondering the rate of hate crimes towards Muslim Americans that police departments and universities have seen. If you could give a brief overview.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure, and this is to all of you. So the question is, what is the rate of hate crimes towards Muslim Americans that police departments and universities have seen? And if you could give a brief overview of the rate of hate crimes.
Well, like I stated, am I on? Sorry, I didn't know if my, okay. Like I stated earlier, I don't have the exact numbers of 2019, but what I can say is race is 38% and religion is 36%. And usually the numbers that I have is that any bias incidents or hate crimes towards Muslims has been the same as previous years. We haven't seen an increase. Sharif, have you?
Hold on,
I'm sorry, I think you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. I said I'm one of those Muslim police officers, and I'm a frequent flyer in a lot of mosques within Montgomery County. I don't think there's any increase. I think this has been the norm. And again, it's back to the definition of hate crime. Do you see people, for example, passing by and tell some Muslim in a mosque, hey, you need to go back to your country? Yes, it happens. But does it mean that it's a crime that actually occurred? No, just a statement, if you want to call it a part of freedom of speech, just to say, hey, go back to your country. I don't see a crime that happened when it comes up to this.
On university campuses, we generally see with hate crimes and bias incident against Muslims ebb and flow with what's taking place on the national landscape. So when something occurs and people perceive that a Muslim group has done something or a Muslim has done something that may be terrorist related or something's happening in a Muslim country, we'll generally see somewhat of a spike in both our hate incidents, which are hate crimes, and our bias incidents as well. But as a general rule, we haven't seen an overall increase.
Officer Hong, did you want to add anything? Hold on. You're muted.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, we haven't seen any type of increase in any type of Muslim American hate crimes. Actually, within the past 2 months of our documentation, there hasn't been an incident or an offense with DC for the past 2 months.
If anybody else has any questions, please. Oh, here we go. So for Chief Gruber, have there been any changes that have occurred at your university with reporting, documenting, et cetera, following the president's executive order on combating anti-Semitism?
No, we haven't seen any real changes. We've always had a very robust system to allow all of our community members to report bias incidents that don't involve a crime. That system's been in place for a long time. And the hate crimes have always been reported to my police department, and they're aggressively investigated. And a lot of times we partner with the FBI or NPD's special liaison branch, we already had a lot of these systems in place that allowed for this reporting and investigating prior to the president's edict.
Thank you. We have a question. 2 speakers have identified recent increases in anti-Semitic hate acts. Do you have any sense of why this is happening and if there are specific identifiable groups doing this?
So this is Lieutenant Hong again. So I wouldn't say that there's any identified groups. I just think within the times at this point, you know, a lot of the Jewish and Chinese and Asian populations are just getting the targets of it. We've just kind of been seeing, it's not like a certain group, it's just a variety of people that are using hate speech. Most of the stuff that we've had just been incidents and not crimes. More to the lines of like, they're saying, hey, you better get out of our country, you have COVID, and you know, that type of thing that we're documenting. And so, but to answer your question, there's nothing that we see any type of pattern with a certain group or anything like that.
Yes, Tom Spoils, the FBI. I have to concur with that. We have seen an uptick, but nothing to suggest a particular group.
You've seen an uptick in these kinds of crimes, but not anything that suggests a particular group is behind them?
Correct.
So I did want to ask also, is there anything that you feel that the larger community within, you know, larger DMV community can do to help in response to these hate crimes from a law enforcement perspective? What can the ordinary person do to help?
Sorry, this is Lieutenant Hall again. So I just want to say, like, you know, if you witness it, you know, call 911. A lot of these underserved communities, they just don't know how to call, or they don't know the procedure. And so if someone that sees it steps up and lets us know, we can track down the victim and kind of get them the proper, you know, reporting procedure and explain it to them. But, you know, it's cliche to say, but if you see it, you know, say something. And, you know, we, especially in DC, we'd be more than happy to come out, talk to you, and just kind of get a better idea of the situation rather than just being on social media and we see it on Instagram and, you know, no one reports it. And so we kind of want to get ahead of it. And so just if you guys see something, just say something.
And sort of going on what Lieutenant Hong had to say, most universities now have very robust threat assessment units. So if people report these incidents, whether they see it or whether the victim themselves, we spend a lot of time with our threat assessment professionals trying to work through these incidents, find out what the real threats are and how we can manage these threats. So reporting it is very important, whether it's yourself or you see it happen to somebody else.
I definitely agree with what the chief said and the lieutenant said. If you see something, say something, report it, even if you weren't directly offended or if it wasn't geared towards you. But we also rely with our stakeholders and our community partners. And I'll give you an example. There was an incident that occurred in December in which a lady was shopping in Bethesda and someone drove up and called her the N-word and she didn't report it. It wasn't until a friend of hers who had attended a meeting at a local church in which one of our officers was there talking about hate crimes and bias incidents, went to her and said, you need to report this. She reached out to the Office of Human Rights, Director Stowe contacted me, and we were able to get in contact with her and give her choices what she needed to do. At first, she didn't feel comfortable having the police come to her residence. So we also told her that she could either go to any district station or come up to headquarters. She then chose to come up to headquarters and do a police report. We report every hate crime and every bias incident. So we want members of the community to spread the word because we rely on you. And also, open a line of communication with your children. A lot of children I've seen incidents occur in schools using the N-word, drawing a swastika, usually when they have a section in education dealing with World War II, talking about Germany, talking about the Nazis. So a lot of kids are curious and decide, well, I'm just going to go ahead and scratch the swastika on the table without really knowing the meaning. And I think if parents and us as a whole, as a community and as a society, open these lines of communication with each of us and also our young people, then I think, you know, it'd be easier for us to do our jobs.
Could you also talk briefly about when there are hate incidents online and what to do?
So if there is any hate incident or hate crime, please call 911 or the non-emergency number. First thing we have to do is report it, because we really can't report or investigate a crime if we don't know about it. So if there is one particularly being done on social media, then we have an investigative unit that will go ahead and specializes in social media crimes, and they go ahead and start investigating. But the first and foremost is to report the crime.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. We do have one additional question, and that is going back to the issue of the rise in anti-Semitic hate acts, certainly that we were seeing in New York, and we saw some in the DC area as well. And the audience member wants to know if you have any sense as to why there is an uptick.
Yeah, we don't have any sense as to why there is the uptick. But we have, as I said, we've noticed it, but no sense as to why.
Okay. All right, well, if nobody else has any further, does anyone else have any further questions? I'll just wait a few seconds. But if there are no further questions, then I'd like to thank all of you for your time and your willingness to come here and talk about, give your perspective. And this is all very critical information for us to have. So I really appreciate your sharing it with us. I know that there was some interest in getting your contact information or any other statistics or documentation or information that you might have, so we can be in touch with that, and I can make sure it gets out to the panelists. Sorry, to the audience. All right. So thank you. So now we're going to move on to the second panel. This is going to be we're going to be looking at this issue more from a community perspective. Oh, sorry. We do have one other question. Can online access to hate crimes? Yes, I believe we can do that. Someone asked, can online access to hate crime statistics be provided after the meeting? So is that possible?
Yes, if you go ahead onto montgomerycountymd.gov, and I can provide you the website, there is our yearly report, and also there is Active Montgomery. So the person who can go ahead and put in the criteria if you just want to see any bias incidents or hate crimes against gender during a different time period, they can go ahead and look that information up themselves.
And for the colleges and universities, you can go on any university's website and the police department's website at any university and get your CLERY data, C-L-E-R-Y. We have to produce an annual report, and hate and bias crimes are part of this annual report. Any university across the country reports this.
It's the same thing with DC as well. We have it's on our MPD homepage, and I'll provide the link to Simi, but we have everything laid out as well.
Thank you. There was one other question. Okay, there was one other question, but I'm not getting it. So if it comes up, if I'm able to get it, I will ask in a little bit. In the meantime, thank you again so much for your willingness to be here, for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. So we're going to move on now to the second panel, and Rabbi Abby Sharovsky from JCRC is going to introduce that panel, which will focus on communities that have been targeted and how they have responded.
Hi, thanks, Simi. So thank you again, everyone, for hosting this and participating today. I am honored to be here. I am the Director of Intergroup Relations and Rabbi in Residence for the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington, and fortunately have worked closely with so many of the people on this call, including the panelists that I get to speak with today. So I am very happy to introduce, I'll go in the order in which people are showing up on my screen here, Meredith Weisel from the ADL. She is the Senior Associate Regional Director for ADL, handling legislative, community engagement, a lot of education things, and she'll tell you more about her work. Another community partner, Huranessa Faryad. Huranessa is the head of outreach and interfaith engagement, is it? Or just interfaith? Okay. At the Adams Center, All Dulles Area Muslim Society Center. And Sharanpreet Singh, who is a student and part of the Sikh Kid to Kid initiative in his community. So thank you to the three of you for participating today. And let's start with, if you could tell us about your role in your community and in this conversation. So Meredith, if you'd like to begin.
Sure, I can do that. I'm going to actually pull up a PowerPoint to kind of go through a little bit what ADL does. So I will share my screen. Give me 1 second, and then I'll go through a couple of things. And in particular, towards the end, before community resources, I'm going to also focus, because I know it's a question on people's mind, what's been going on with coronavirus related to some of the hate that we've been seeing. So give me 1 second. Okay, hold on. Okay. Everybody should hopefully be able to see the screen. Okay. Simi, let me know if they can't for some reason, because I can't see the chat now.
No problem.
Okay, so let me just pull up the PowerPoint so I can see it myself, which will be helpful. Okay. All right. Okay, so my name is Meredith Weisel, for those I don't know. Thank you again to Simi, to the Interfaith Council, to Alan from the AJC, Abby from JCRC, my former employer, for any who doesn't know, and of course all the law enforcement who I have worked very closely with on this call. So just to start going through the PowerPoint, which is not working, hold on. Give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. Okay, there we go. So what is ADL's mission? So ADL mostly was formed as an anti-hate organization, really dealing with anti-Semitism, but that's our primary focus, but we do work a lot against hate and bigotry. So of course we work to protect the Jewish people. So I will focus a lot on anti-Semitism, but we also work very closely with all of our partners. Huranessa just actually spoke at one of our events the other night, which I couldn't view the other night, but I heard it went well. So wonderful to hear that. But working to secure justice and fair treatment for all, and specifically focusing on hate and violence across extremism across all the different communities. Just real quick, this is real quick what ADL does. I'm not going to go through everything because I want to make sure that we have time, but one of the biggest things I want to highlight, and really what a lot of people have been asking about, promoting respectful schools and communities. And I don't realize that a lot of us, or all of us, are home right now, but there are some things I'm going to talk about, fighting hate from home and what we can still be doing even though we're not all necessarily together right now, and how can we still continue to confront discrimination. The essence of anti-Semitism, these are just sort of the three focuses related to that. And I do want to note from my personal perspective too, that my synagogue that I go to about, gosh, I don't even remember how many years ago it was now, but I myself, my synagogue, faced anti-Semitism. So I understand this on a personal level. Our synagogue was vandalized. We found out who did it. The person was prosecuted. And our rabbi and our leaders of the congregation actually worked on an education aspect of it, because it was a teen who did it, who was 18, but we did a trip to the Holocaust Museum for him. So there are ways besides just working within the hate crimes laws as well. So I do want to note that. So this is also very personal to me as well as working on it professionally. But just anti-Semitism, the hatred of the Jewish faith, hatred of Jews as a perceived race, and then we also deal with hatred related to the Jewish state. So this, I'm going to kind of go through these just very, very quickly. I think everybody knows what happened in Charlottesville related to the Unite the Right rally, and we have worked also very closely with the mother of Heather Heyer, who was murdered during that, who was part of the group who was countering the white supremacists, the KKK, there were racist skinheads, other alt-right who were protesting everything down in Charlottesville. So this wasn't just related to the Jewish community, this was related to a lot of different communities down there. And it is, even though a lot of people were prepared for the rally, nobody saw where it was gonna come. So clearly this was sort of the first that we've seen on a larger scale. And then of course, after that was Pittsburgh, at the Tree of Life Synagogue, and where we all know that a gunman went in and murdered 11 different worshipers. So the extremists, they are out there, they are active, and I think that's something we need to keep in mind. What I wanted to do, sort of the next slide, is specific. So ADL back in 2019 did a poll related to anti-Semitic attitudes, but we also found was that there are a lot of people who are concerned about a lot of other communities as well. And the one thing, I know Officer Estrada talked about earlier about the different laws that have changed in both Maryland, and there are a couple of hate crimes laws, but Virginia also, for the first time now, their hate crime law has gender identity, sexual orientation, and disability that were not in the hate crimes law. This just passed. So Virginia finally has that. And in particular, the first thing on here I want to note, we haven't actually talked, nobody's talked about yet, the transgender community is has had a lot of violence against them as well, and it has a lot of discrimination. And there, if you notice the numbers here, they're actually the highest number on this slide that people are concerned about. And then our African Americans, our Muslims, gay and lesbian, Hispanic, Latinos, Jews, and Asian Americans. I would say that number has probably changed now, given what's going on with coronavirus, with COVID-19, and I'll talk really quick about that after. So just to go through the other couple of slides quickly, so just some numbers, and I know somebody asked a question about providing numbers. ADL has what's called our heat map, which if you just go to our main website, adl.org, there's a heat map, and this can provide you with overall statistics. As of yesterday, because when I pulled these numbers up from 2019 through 2020, and our 2019 full numbers are not complete either, they will be out in a few weeks as well. There have been 5,528 incidents of extremism or anti-Semitism in the United States. We have a Center on Extremism that tracks this, not just related to anti-Semitism, but just other numbers. So I want to give you the numbers from Maryland, DC, and Virginia, just so you understand some of the stats. So in Maryland, so far, there have been 107 incidents. That makes up with 2 terrorist plots and attacks, 84 pieces of white supremacist propaganda, and 24 were anti-Semitic incidents. In Virginia, we've had 195 incidents so far. 1 was an extremist murder, 2 were terrorist plots or attacks, 3 were white supremacist events that were actually held in Virginia. 162 pieces of white supremacist propaganda has been tracked, and 34 anti-Semitic incidents. And then in DC, we've seen 51 incidents from 2019 through 2020 so far. 7 of those have been white supremacist events, and that should be noted because DC is the nation's capital. We do tend to have a lot that come to the district specifically to just have a presence showing they're in the nation's capital. There were 25 white supremacist propaganda and 22 incidents of anti-Semitism. This, because I only have our 2018 numbers, and we work very closely with the FBI as well and get a lot of our statistics from their hate crime stats. This was just the numbers from the annual audit for anti-Semitic incidents in 2018 was 1,879. So before I get into just the last few things that I want to talk about coronavirus and what can you be doing in the community, and then personally what I did myself when my synagogue went through all of this. So of course, always contact law enforcement. we can't talk about that enough. Hate, conspiracy, and the coronavirus. So unfortunately, you would think with everybody being home that we wouldn't see an uptick, but unfortunately we've seen a lot. Really what a lot of it has focused on, we've seen a lot of incidents of bias and harassment nationwide from extremist groups, but even just every day as to what's been going on related to the virus. It's been focused sort of on these categories: power, greed, a tool to kill the Jews, China-related nicknames, insulting, exaggerating Chinese habits, fear, and target of all Chinese people. We've also seen an uptick in anti-immigration. And the last one is people are saying coronavirus was manufactured. This was just one of the memes that we've seen that went across some of the channels. The next, I'm just going to show you, these are just a couple of the slides. Sheriff Clark, who's a former chief sheriff in Milwaukee County in Wisconsin, posted that no media outlet has asked about George Soros' involvement in the flu panic. Then some of the other ones have blamed it directly on the Asian American community and that the Jews are controlling them. COVID-19 was spread by the Jews, so the stock market tanks. I'm not going to read the bad language that is there, but it has directly focused against the Asian community. We've seen it called the Kung Flu, Winnie the Flu. These are just some things that are on main channels. So if you do see something on Instagram, on Facebook, on any other social media, take a picture and send it to law enforcement. You can also report it to ADL because we track all of this. Real world incidents also at GW. We actually saw some students who attended APAC who were targeted by anti-Semitism once it was found out that they attended APAC and that coronavirus, unfortunately, somebody had it from there. So it's in real time what we're seeing. So what can you do? All the organizations on here, I want to note, ADL is just one of them. The JCRC, which is my former employer, is amazing with this. We work directly with them. Alan Ronkin with AJC as well. Hernesa at the Adams Center, and obviously Casey and Simi with the Interfaith community. Everybody on here, this is just specifically, so of course, responding to incidents, we also train our law enforcement, lobbying and advocating for legislation. That's something you can do from home. When those of us who do this on a regular basis were kicked out of the General Assembly, unfortunately because of it, we were still able to advocate online. There are education programs that we have, really mobilizing and engaging community leaders like what's going on today. This is one of the most important things that you can do. We also have something that we call the ADL Good Fight Toolkit, which is on our website that can be downloaded and really has how to educate yourself in the community, how to work, our education resources. So helping students make sense of news stories and bias and injustice. And really, the biggest thing is empowering our youth. And that's the one I want to kind of leave you with as far as what are online resources that you can be doing, because there are guides to fighting hate, and it's not just about anti-Semitism, it's not just about Islamophobia or xenophobia, it's about everything. As I said, we've seen it against the Asian community. So those are some of the things we need to focus on. I'm going to just skip this one. So people have been asking now, what can we do at home? What are the things that we can be doing? So you can of course always report one of the incidents. There are online resources. ADL has another webinar that I would encourage all of you to listen next week that you can sign up for. And then just on a sort of a personal note, so what happened a few years ago at my synagogue, Shari Torah in Gaithersburg, is I'm a runner and I was out running early in the morning and I saw our entire synagogue had swastikas all over it, on the windows, on the side of the building. As somebody who works in this space and you hear it, you see it, you respond to incidents you never expect it'll happen to you, it does. I immediately contacted law enforcement. My community was amazing here. We had our Montgomery County legislators, people like Casey, came to an interfaith service that night at our synagogue. People need to come together around a lot of this so we can report everything we want to law enforcement, but if we're not working together as a community, that's the most important thing. And it was very empowering to see on a personal level too when that happened, because to have my kids see that when they were much younger and to watch them on the news, news teams coming and my kids painting over the swastikas was very heartbreaking, because you just never think that's going to happen. So the only way we're ever going to stop this is if we're all working together and working with our law enforcement. So I can't thank the Interfaith Council enough for you guys for hosting something like this, because all of these organizations are here to do good. And really, even though we're at home still, if we continue to all talk, and when you see things like cyberbullying, which we've already started to see an uptick of going on since schools are not home, report it. Talk to your kids, talk to the other parents. People need to still be communicating through social media, through things like Zoom platforms and all along those lines. So with that, I will stop because I know there are other people, and I will stop sharing. Thanks, Demi. And
Thank you.
sorry.
It's okay. Thank you, Meredith. I'd like to now turn to Hiranessa. If you could tell us about your role in the community and in this conversation. What's it like at Adams?
Hi, Abby. Hi, guys. Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me? Okay, so I'm just going to, back up from everything everybody else has said so far, from law enforcement and our interfaith partners. I think it's so important for us to really take into account incidents as well as hate crimes and the differences between that, because it does affect our community as a whole, regardless of whether they're hate crimes or not. When someone is saying something that's derogatory or hateful or anti-Semitic or Islamophobic, these are things that we have to report, and this is something that we've been working on with our community. So when we take incidents, let's say in school, in public schools, or people are out on the street from the Muslim community, what are the things that are happening and how are they responding? It's mostly people saying derogatory words to them, or calling them names like terrorists, or connecting Muslims to ISIS and people overseas, or especially when something does happen overseas, we see an uptick in this, and we see a lot of people, especially Muslim women, who are visibly Muslim and wear the hijab, which is the scarf, and they're walking around doing their regular work or going shopping. There will be someone who will say something that is derogatory. So a lot of the times people don't know that they should report this, even though it's not a hate crime, but it is something that needs to be reported, so that we can see the trends of how incidents that are happening around the world are actually affecting people who are living here, and those of us who are actually being the ones receiving on the other end. And one of the things we've decided at Adams, I am head of outreach, public relations, and interfaith, is to work with our local public schools. So we're in Loudoun County, even though our parking lot's in Fairfax County. It definitely is something that we've taken a more progressive and active role in. So I started the Adams LCPS liaison team, which we call the ALL team, and I've trained 9 or 10 parents to go into public schools during the time when teachers have either teacher training or after school programs for the teachers, and parents, teachers who are and staff who are interested will come to that training and actually learn about what it means to be a Muslim and how they can help their Muslim students in the school, because it's not just students saying something to the students, but there's also a perpetual uptick that we've seen with teachers saying things to students. For instance, if a girl walks into class wearing a hijab and it's a hot summer day, and the teacher says, well, it's really hot, why are you wearing that? Well, you've just opened up the doors for everybody else in the classroom to now bully that students. So we're trying to teach the staff and the teachers to acknowledge that the words that they're using, the interactions that they're having in their classroom, is directly affecting all the Muslim kids. So now the teachers, are they themselves learning about our holidays and what that means and how they're actually responding to that, so that they know what the kids need. And then if they were to see anything in terms of people picking on the students, whether it's teachers, staff, or students, they would be the ones to intervene and stop it. So that's one thing we've been working on, and we've seen a really good traction in that. And I have a whole portfolio and a document on digital document that I'm going to disseminate to the 2,800 mosques around the United States, so that they have something that we've already worked on and have, so that they can use it when the time is necessary for them, which is now anyway. So that's one aspect of people being called names, or going on the street, women being attacked, and teaching them to report these things. We have individual incidents for For instance, my daughters were berated in Reston Town Center a few years ago by a gentleman just calling them names and saying a lot of horrible things about our prophet and our religion. And they were, you know, at that time they were like 13 and 14 years old, and people on the street were listening to them being harassed by this man, but nobody helped them. And it got to a point where they had to run into the parking lot and hide behind my car and call me. And so then I had to come, and it got to a point where like now Muslim girls who would wear the hijab are taking them off because they don't feel safe and they don't want to get picked on and they don't want to be bullied. So now it's a question of, do I practice my faith or do I feel safe? And which one comes first and which one do I have to like work around? So that's another thing that we're helping our community with as well. And we're not forcing them to take any decisions, a decision they have to take themselves, but to kind of walk them through about what is good for them at that time. With law enforcement, we have a great relationship with Loudoun County Police and Fairfax County and the FBI as well. At the Adams Center, we get a lot of threats all the time, on the phone, on email. The weirdest thing you can think of, we get them, and it's really disheartening to see that kind of stuff coming through. And you know, it's something that we always relay back to mostly the law enforcement and FBI, and majority of the time, if they find it to be credible and criminal and that intent, they will prosecute. So, but we've been able to do that because we've worked on our relationship with law enforcement, and that is something that the Muslim community really needs to work on. And they need to know that law enforcement is there to protect them. They are there to help them. And the community leaders need to be open and invite law enforcement into their center so that people can meet them and they can have a civil, you know, human relationship with law enforcement. And that's something that we've been working with for over 20 years. When an incident happens, law enforcement will come and they will walk through the mosque and no one says anything to them. Or even if there isn't an incident, they will come and just say, we just want to come and make sure everything is okay. And our members are not worried to think that, oh, the police is here because they're spying on us. They're like, oh yeah, that's Officer so-and-so. I know him, I'm gonna go say hi. And the kids run up to them and give them high fives. And this is something that we've built on so that when an incident does come, law enforcement automatically comes on their own. We don't have to call them. They will say, well, what do you need? We're here for you. For instance, when the New Zealand shooting happened last year, Loudoun County and Fairfax County and the FBI all were very, very forthcoming in their services and calling us and making sure that all the things that we needed were being taken care of. They had, you know, officers in the parking lot. They had officers outside, kind of, you know, making sure traffic is taken care of. And then we had an interfaith vigil at night where so many people came, and it was really nice to see the interfaith community coming together because these types of incidents, although at that point it was against Muslims, it happens to all faith groups at this point. You know, whether it's the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the Hindu community, the Sikh community, everyone's being targeted for a variety of reasons from many different groups. And to see that, you know, statistics show that there's, you know, like a $35 million Islamophobia enterprise in the United States where people are actually paying to, you know, put out information that is wrong about our faith. It's our job to now counter that and let people know who we actually are and how similar we are. We might worship differently, we might do things a little differently, but from a human perspective, we are all the same, and that we have to work together in making sure that everyone feels safe in this country. And then again, the community coming together. It's important for our interfaith partners to know who we are and for us to know who they are. So we do a lot of interfaith work in terms of just having a dialogue and events. We've had, I think, this would have been our 14th Seder service coming up at Adams. I've been to many Shabbat services and Sunday services, and we have a youth choir who does a lot of interfaith work and has sang at the Washington Cathedral and the Washington Hebrew congregation. So all of these things put together is something that we've been using to making sure that our community is safe, but the information's out there as well.
Thank you. As someone who's been to Adams a few times now, it's such a beautiful space. And it's so sad thinking about, we get threats every day. In walking up to Adams, and I see kids running around, and they look like the kids that, we drop off at Hebrew school, at our synagogues, and Sunday school at our churches. And it's the same. We really are all in this together. And knowing that those kids are there with these threats going on is scary and sad.
And we emphasize that even with the Muslims that come to the Adams Center, because we're the second largest mosque in the United States, the largest one in this area. We serve over 25,000 people. And when JCRC was vandalized with the swastikas, I went and I spoke on behalf of the Muslim community, and that's important, right? Although it wasn't my faith group that was attacked, that doesn't mean that we're separate. Right? We have to be there for one another. And these are things that are foundational in our faith anyway, in terms of how we're supposed to respond to hate, how we're supposed to respond to other people as human beings, and how we're supposed to, be understanding of the sanctity of life, right? And that hate is hate, regardless of who's getting it. We have to teach our community that even though it's happening outside of our community, we still have to respond to it.
Thank you. Now, Sharon Freed, I'd like to, welcome. And I know you've been here, but now we're seeing you on camera. And so tell us about your role in the Sikh community, Sikh Kid to Kid, and a little bit about how you come to this conversation.
Okay, so Sikh Kid to Kid is an organization, nonprofit organization, and we do work with many other fellow Sikhs in our Gurdwara and our temple, and we bring them all together. And we do debate, we do talk, and talk about what goes on in the Sikh community and our students that are also in the schools of Montgomery County and other counties around us. So basically, how we first started out was, we started out 2 years ago after the Wisconsin Gurdwara shooting. This was when the Gurdwara was targeted and many Sikhs were shot inside while our service was going on. And after that, we started to talk and started bringing everyone together. And now what we do to take this on a level for other Sikhs, all the Sikhs, we come together and we talk about many problems going on in this society. And so first off, we do teacher trainings. We train our teachers in Montgomery County. We've trained hundreds of teachers. They come all the time, and we do big services and train them. And we do tell them what is going on in our community and who we are, because Sikhs are mostly mistaken as Hindus, Muslims, and we are targeted. And it is very common that our history teachers in Montgomery County, it has been in the past said that they have told the students that we are a form of Hindus or Muslims, which is incorrect. So now we are training our teachers to tell the students that they're teaching in our schools that we're not Hindus or Muslims. We're not related to them. We're Sikhs and we are different. But we are all equal. So that's how we're taking it on a school level and training our youth in all of Montgomery County schools. And then what we do to represent everyone in Montgomery County is that we're working on removing all misconceptions of who a Sikh is, making our next generation accepting of all cultures and religions. Sikh Kid to Kid is unique in being an organization that is completely made up of kids and giving the Sikh youth a voice. So that is what we're based on.
Thank you. And could you maybe say a little bit about the reaction in the Sikh community here in Montgomery County after the shooting at the Gurdwara a few years ago?
Okay, a few years ago after the shooting in the Gurdwara, we all were surprised and we all were like, we have to do something. So we all came together, we debated, we talked about it, and we started Sikh Kid to Kid. We started going out, we started informing and telling people who Sikhs are. And now this has happened, the hate crimes of Sikhs has slowly decreased over the years in America, and we're telling people, informing them who we are as Sikhs. And we are a youth organization helping to inform the youth.
Thank you. So I have a question, a few questions here. Maybe what has been encouraging in these, we talk about the statistics, we talk about, you know, the rise in crimes in one community or the daily experience in another community. What have been the encouraging parts, times, instances, and also how are you highlighting those within your community and raising them up as points to follow and focus on? So it's a question for everyone, but Shrampreet, if you'd like to start, please.
Basically our yeah, I'll speak. Can I speak in a bit?
Sure. Yeah, you can. If someone else would like to take it, please go ahead.
Sure, I can jump in. So a lot of times people don't see the other communities coming in and actually helping out and voicing their concerns over what has happened. So I think one of the ways that we've been really fortunate enough in showcasing that support is through social media and using our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram pages to highlight these interactions for people in terms of like when there is a hate crime that has happened or when there is an incident that might have been one person, but now look at the hundreds of other people who are coming in and actually showing support for us and telling us that they're with us and asking us what we need and trying to help the community and comfort the community, whether it's our local Loudoun County counselors who want to come in and talk to our members about an incident that had happened and how they're feeling about that and help giving them coping mechanisms. We need to highlight those. We need to show that although there's one person that might have done this or two people, but it's really the influx of love and generosity and commitment that our interfaith partners and people of other faith groups have actually shown, and law enforcement as well.
Meredith, do you?
So I would just say ditto to a lot of what was just said. I also think that the focus in seeing the younger generation more than anything and in the school system and a lot of the programs that they've been able to do, you know, just all the different organizations on here, you know, the with JCR's the Student to Student, with the Seek to Seek Kids program, with, you know, ADL's No Place for Hate. I think all of them have different elements of it. And I think that really starts changing the conversation. And I think that's really what shows the community coming together, you know, because you're trying to break down the biases, you know, everything. We have a thing called a pyramid for hate and a pyramid of hate. And, you know, things don't just start with something like genocide or major hate crimes. It starts with bias and stereotypes, and really breaking down those barriers is an easier thing to work on with kids than it is with adults. But then there are ways to do it with adults too in different types of programs. And I think that's really where you start seeing people come together and showing that no matter, you know, race, ethnicity, religion, whatever it is, it really helps, you know, breaking down those barriers and people working together. And I think once we start seeing that out more in the community, that's how we can all come together and drown out the voices that are out there trying to be vocal for hate.
Thank you. So there are a couple, I know, Shrampreet, you are in Montgomery County, and Hironessa located out in the Fairfax-Loudoun border. I believe your parking lot just kind of straddles the counties, is what I heard you say once. And then ADL covering a wider expanse of the area. How have the different school districts responded? I know that was something that came up in all three conversations, all three speakers, with the importance of going in and speaking with the schools, the importance of not just about how the students are acting, but educating the educators on how to make a Muslim student feel welcome for wearing a hijab, or how to make a Sikh student feel welcome for the traditional garb that they're going to wear. What are some of the efforts that are underway, and what else would you like to see happen?
So one thing that happened in terms of me going into the schools and bringing the parents in there was that the staff and the teachers were really appreciative of us coming in, informing them on how to interact with the Muslim kids in their school, because they had no idea that these issues were even an issue for their students, because you're dealing with post 9/11 children, and Muslim kids are not going to raise their hand and say, well, yeah, it's prayer time, I need to go and pray in front of a whole class, especially when the class doesn't even know what that means. So they were actually quite receptive and very appreciative of us going and having a conversation with them. So much so where one English teacher, their senior class, invited me to come and talk about, because I was born in Afghanistan. I came here as a refugee after the Soviet invasion, and they wanted me to talk about that in connection to The Kite Runner, the book, and Islam, and how all of that kind of ties together with what the Taliban are doing and what extremist groups are doing. And she sent me her PowerPoint presentation, and as I looked through it, I immediately wrote back to her and I said, do you mind taking the word Islamic out of the phrase Islamic jihadist or Islamic extremist or Islamic terrorist next to all these groups that you have? And she immediately replied back and said, yes, I'm so sorry. And I explained to her that the minute you use these words, you're validating their existence as a group that is fundamentally coming from the faith, which it's not. So it is our job to slowly, unfortunately it's a slow process, to educate people who are using, and she's been using this PowerPoint for 5-6 years now, and she didn't even realize that the words she was using is actually promoting this idea of equating a faith to violence and extremism. So when I was giving her the information, she was extremely receptive, and she really appreciated me pointing that out. She took it out, and all the other teachers who were on the email were really receptive of it as well. So it is our job to not only go and have a conversation with them, but also point out things that are incorrect. And they're all have always been really receptive of it.
You want me to go, Abby?
If you like. There are some other questions popping up too, but feel free.
We can go to the other questions. It's fine. All I would just say is I think that there's a lot within all the jurisdictions. I mean, my ADL office focuses on Maryland, DC, Virginia, North Carolina, and we work across all the states, so it really varies from county to county or jurisdiction to jurisdiction. One of the most universal things I think has just been a focus on Holocaust and genocide education from the state level, and making sure that when they're teaching World War II, and so that people can have a better understanding, because it has not been done very well over the years. So I think that that's something that I think we haven't talked about yet on this call. So, and that's something that I think you're seeing a greater focus on now.
And what about programs for educating adults on this issue? I know clearly it starts with children, and teaching children is some of the, as a wonderful way to lay the roots and the seeds and the roots for this type of discussion. But there are adults who would like to learn as well. So are there programs for educating adults and bringing them together on these issues?
Sure. So from an ADL perspective, so we have a couple programs, a Worlds of a Difference Institute, and I think I saw Marla was the one who asked the question, because I was looking at the questions before. So Marla, I'm happy to talk with you in a little more in depth about that, because I know I've talked about that. But we have a Worlds of a Difference Institute, which really it forces people to confront their own biases, and it's a specific program, and we work with our education staff works on that. So anybody who is interested, we can put in touch with our education staff. We also have table talk conversations that can be done with families as well, along with just adults. So there are a couple of different things that are easy for download for conversations about confronting bias and the right phrasings to use. I'm just looking on our website. that we have. And then there are a couple of other things that are done within the schools that parents can also be involved with as well, specifically focused on more adults confronting their bias. But the biggest one is what's called a World of a Difference Institute. That's one of the things that we specifically have. And then, of course, myself, and I know any of the other organizations on here, are always happy to come into the different faith-based institutions or just other organizations to give presentations and go into detail about some things so that adults can get a better understanding.
And just a quick follow-up on that, I know that JCRC, we were in the progress of putting together several programs at different places. And then the whole world changed, and a lot of that seems to have been put on hold. But as things continue to evolve, we can certainly look at ways to do programs like this for communities in this type of format. Like some clarification on, there's a question that came in about what do we mean when we say a piece of white supremacist propaganda? And then also, how do we report things like this? Things that we're not quite sure if they're crimes, like a derogatory comment or something that's problematic, that it feels wrong. Sort of how do we know it when we see it, and what do we do?
Sure. So on the white supremacist propaganda, so first, even before that, what I'll say is you got to keep in mind, when I give you numbers also, it's only what's actually been reported. It's not necessarily everything that is out there. So with white supremacist propaganda, you're talking about, like, for example, there have been communities that have had KKK flyers or other alt-right white supremacist organizations that have flyered neighborhoods. Are in DC a lot, we see them stuck up on like the telephone poles or on trees. Anything that is sort of, leaflets, things along those lines. Sometimes it could just be out there thrown in the community. There are things that we do track online as well. So it just depends on what has been reported, but think about, any of the white supremacist groups, and there are a whole lot more than just the KKK that exists, and we do have a list. If you're trying to figure out what should be reported, ADL has a full list of hate symbols and hate groups that are listed on our website, and it is getting updated on a regular basis because more and more fringe groups are popping up. So those are the kind of things to look for. As far as reporting, always report to law enforcement, without a doubt. But you can also, ADL is one of the main organizations that is tracking everything, whether it's anti-Semitism, other forms of extremism, Islamophobia, if a bias incident against somebody because of their gender identity and stuff. We have on our website, it can be anonymous. If you do not have to give your name if you're not comfortable. We do have on our website an incident report form that can be filled out, and then we talk directly with law enforcement to figure out if they found out. Sometimes, like David Hong was earlier said, he just had a meeting in our office that we were talking about things because there were incidents he didn't know about that we knew, and vice versa. So just, you can report it directly, but always your first line should always be reporting it to law enforcement. But we know people are not always comfortable with that, and you can always report it to us because we do track it all in our database. Does that answer the question, Abby? Okay.
Yes, thank you. I have several questions that are coming in. First, Sharon Preet, if you could tell us a little bit about your work with teachers, and do you feel that the teachers in Montgomery County have been receptive to See Kid to Kid? And I realize I have my own kid to kid that just walked in. But how have the teachers been when you've come in, especially as a student? What have you been able to, I'm sorry. You know that video where that's, I'm having that moment now. Thank you guys.
All good, it's wonderful.
It's all good, we're fine. So yes, how have you experienced as a student approaching your teachers about this and approaching administration on these issues?
So we do work in See Kid to Kid. We do train the teachers. We take them through our whole service. We take them through our process of how we do things in the Gurdwara. who we are, and we train them on what a Sikh has on them. For example, we have our 5 articles of faith, and one is our hair, why we don't cut it. We explain to them our many of our basic things that are misconceptions in the Sikh community and others. And teachers have a good experience. They can ask us any questions on a one-on-one or as a community, how we face the problems. And we do tell the teachers on how they can tell their students that have questions about Sikhs and how we face problems. We inform the teachers on how they can take on these problems or questions asked from other students.
Thank you. So so this is a question about the rising problem in both Montgomery and Howard County Public Schools, bullying based on religious identity and whether or not it's being addressed. Unfortunate issues where teachers or principals may not always know how to respond to this, and are they're not necessarily given families are not given the best information, told that they should be the ones making the changes rather than the perpetrator. So there are questions on recommendations how to deal with this problematic response. How do you recommend approaching the schools, and how to make sure that schools realize that this is important and that they need to be reporting this and following the proper chain of command and reporting?
I'm happy to jump in. So both ADL and the JCRC have both worked, let's just start with Montgomery County, have both been working with Montgomery County with the superintendent and his staff, particularly the diversity office. So I would say for parents, they need to be talking to the diversity department and talking directly with them, making sure that things are reported. It's sometimes easier to go to administration than to your principal, but you also should be talking directly to your principal. You can also talk either with JCRC or ADL directly, and we're happy on your behalf to also then have conversations with them, because we're both organizations are working directly in the schools with several, whether it's the student to student program, whether it's the No Place for Hate, which both address issues of hate and bias. JCRC's the one is focused more on just the Jewish community. The No Place for Hate that ADL does is focused more on the entire hate and bias, not just one specific group. So I think that that's something that they need to, but they need to know. If people need to, they need to be telling the principals what's going on. They need to be talking with the teachers. And if it's not, you're not getting a response from your school directly, you need to go to central office really and talk with it. Howard County, I would say the same thing. That's why they have the diversity inclusion offices set up now in most of the schools. And they are still trying to get most of them, get up to speed on everything, but also they don't always hear everything. And that is the biggest thing. They don't always know everything that is going on. And so I think reporting more than anything is the biggest problem is, like Hernesa said, or not, sorry, it wasn't Hernesa, it was one of the law enforcement who said earlier, they had a woman who, was in school, but who had an incident where she was called a name and didn't report it. And it wasn't until, she was encouraged to go and talk to law enforcement. So that's the biggest sort of gap, is that they don't always know what's going on.
Okay, thank you. This question is for Hiranessa. What kind of training programs are being used in Montgomery County to train teachers and staff about Arab culture and Islamic religion?
So I have no idea what Montgomery County is doing. I have not worked with them, but I'm more than happy to work with any of the Muslim organizations there who are there, and their children are the ones going to the school to train them and to get them. It's a very simple process, and you don't need to make it overly complicated. And it's important to have local places of worship and organizations to go into the local public schools. It doesn't make sense for me to come from Adams to train the staff at Montgomery County when there are people who can actually do it, who live there and who have a vested interest, whose kids go there. So, you know, you need to be able to train other people in getting them involved in this type of work. So if you know anybody who's interested, you can have them contact me and we can definitely work together on that.
I can also respond to that question a little bit. I work with Casey on the Faith Community Advisory Council for Montgomery County and co-chair the education subcommittee. So that is that is a question that we are constantly looking at, of what kind of information are we getting to the schools? What kind of information are we getting either directly to parents, or is it or to the leadership? So our committee is in the process of sort of re-envisioning itself. And one of the questions that we're asking is how do we best transmit the information that we have? And how do we help our partners like Adams Center and other Muslim community groups in Montgomery County? How do we help them get to the right people in the schools to have this kind of necessary training? So we're looking at working with the parent coordinators, working with the principals, and building those relationships, realizing that it's easier to work that way sometimes than to ask people, say parents, to come in an evening to talk about religious guidelines. So it is a work in process, and we do welcome your questions, and we certainly want to make sure that you know, that parents are feeling like their children are being understood for who they are within their faith tradition, and who they are in their public school setting, and that the two of them are not in conflict. So I saw one more question in here about, do the organizations who are panelists work together regularly? And while that was answered in the text box, I want to say that yes. When I received this email and Simi asked me to participate and said who was going to be on the panel, I said, great, those are wonderful people. I enjoy working with them. I have not had a chance to meet the Shrampreet yet from Seek Kid to Kid, but I've worked with some of the leadership from his community and know that it's a phenomenal program. So yes, I know that I can say from where I sit that we are in regular contact. Sometimes I wish it was even more contact, and not necessarily about hate, but just because there are so many wonderful things that are going on, and it's wonderful when we get to partner. Are there any other, I guess, interesting groups that that you guys get to work with on a regular basis that might be like, oh, I never thought about that partnership? And then we'll bring this all together.
We do work with a couple organizations around the area. For example, we're partner up with a Seek NBA player, and we host a basketball tournament with all kids coming in, and they learn about Sikhism and they play basketball at the same time. That's one organization. We have a couple others that help us represent Seek Kid to Kid. For example, we go to the fairs, we do work with them, we do help spread the word. And we also have had the chance to actually go to the Facebook headquarters and talk to them and help them, teach them on what Sikhism is on a one-on-one level, and train Facebook also.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And thank you also, Shrampreet, for bringing up the basketball tournament first. I think it's important to acknowledge that our groups really do come together and need to come together more often for the positive things, the bridge building activities, the things that help us get to know each other on a very human level before there is some kind of catastrophe. So.
At Adams, we started a program under my department and the Youth Imams department, which is going to be called the Adams Youth Interfaith Ambassadors. So it's getting the youth involved in interfaith work, at a young age and doing it in a very fun and interactive way with other faith groups and their youth, and not so much talking. We would only limit that to 15 minutes, and then they would do activities like whitewater rafting, zip lining, activities outside, just to interact with each other on a human level and get to know each other, because it shouldn't wait until we're in our 40s and 50s and 60s to be like, oh, wait, I want to do interfaith work. And that's usually what I've seen. But we need to figure out ways of getting the youth involved in a much more interactive and fun way. So this is something that I'm imploring all the organizations, that they have it, please get in contact with me so we can get the youth groups together. And then the other thing is I've hosted Kids for Peace, because I actually love working with kids overall. I'm also the music director of Adams Beat Choir, which is the only mosque youth choir in the whole country, because I do have a music background. And we hosted Kids for Peace, who come from Jerusalem, Muslim, Jewish, and Christian kids who come to the US in the summertime. And not last year, the year before, it was the first time they came. And it was just amazing to see kids who are from different faith backgrounds, who are from different ethnic backgrounds, come into the Adams Center and sit together, have a meal, listen to a few people talk for a very short time. And then I had bought board games because I just wanted them to play together. And it was so much fun. I have pictures if you guys want to see it. These kids from Jerusalem and Adam's kids sitting on the floor playing Jenga and rooting for each other. And they don't even know each other's names, you know, but they were rooting each other, and they were saying, oh, pick that one, don't pick that one. And they were playing Connect Four, Uno, just to be, a kid and have them really interact with one another. And no one was saying, oh, you're from here, you're from there, and you're from this faith, and I'm from that faith, and I'm better than you. We actually had some of the Palestinian Muslim kids come up to me and said, and they were shocked. They're like, well, this is a very interesting place, because the mosques in Jerusalem are not like this, where, we see so many different activities and it's laid out the way it is. And the girls were like, we really appreciate the fact that you are head of a department as a female Muslim woman and speaking on behalf of the community. And they thought that that was very inspiring. So we need to be able to have these types of things for the children and come up with ideas and ways in getting them engaged in the work.
Thank you.
I would just say, as far as other groups also, that I know we directly work with the Southern Poverty Law Center, which also tracks all the different hate crimes, the NAACP, a couple of other African-American groups, the LGBTQ rights, or several of the organizations there. I think a lot surrounding criminal justice reform, a lot of just different civil rights groups, the ACLU on certain issues as well. So it varies depending on the issue that we're working on, but those are the other types of groups that we work with outside of the faith-based organizations.
Okay, thank you to the panelists. It's been wonderful speaking with you this afternoon, and I'm going to turn it back to Simi.
Simi, you're on mute still.
There we go. Okay. Thank you again for all of you who came. I really appreciate it. It's wonderful to have you all here. I hope that you found this event to be, to be informative and also hopeful, because although we're talking about something very difficult, such as hate crimes and hate incidents, a lot of what I'm hearing, as well as ways that we're combating them,